Joining me now is the panel. Here on set with me is Daniela Diaz, congressional reporter for Notice. Simone Sanders Townsend, former senior advisor to President Biden and Vice President Harris, and she is also co-host of The Weeknight on MSNBC. And Mark Bednar, former advisor to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and a principal at Monument Advocacy. Thank you all so much for joining me. Daniela, I want to start with you. What'd you make of those poll numbers?
It's not surprising. It's clear that Americans are very frustrated with crime across the country, especially in major cities. You know, we've seen Los Angeles and Chicago and D.C. We're D.C. residents. We've seen what has happened post-pandemic here. But what I found interesting, too, is if you really delve into those numbers, Gabe, you see that there's a major divide between Republicans and Democrats and how they feel on this issue. Democrats saying that they oppose a lot of what President Donald Trump is doing on this issue, and Republicans largely praising him. Now, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out when Congress comes back into session next week. They've been gone the last couple of weeks in recess, but they've been hearing from their constituents in town halls, the few that have been having them when it comes to this issue. And you're seeing that constituents across the country are seeing what's happening in D.C. and sharing concerns, especially with Republicans, about where they are on this issue. So this is not going to go away anytime soon. Yeah,
and pointing out the Reuters poll has people not on board with what's going on in D.C. with the National Guard. But what do you think these poll numbers mean for, if the president, as he's threatening to do, is threatening to send more federal resources into other cities across the country?
Well, if he sees that there's support in this, and especially blue states where he does not have a lot of support, and he can try to do something good, it seems like he's very open to this. I mean, we're saying that he wants to send troops to Chicago. He's very open to that. Of course, Chicago and Illinois are very opposed to that idea. But it's not an issue that he is backing away from. And he's seen, as we've seen here in D.C., 12 days after, obviously not after yesterday, of no homicides. It seems to be working.
Well, Mark, I want to play some of what we heard from President Trump at yesterday's cabinet meeting. Let's listen.
So the line is that I'm a dictator, but I stop crime. So a lot of people say, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. But I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime. I have the right to do anything I want to do. I'm the president of the United States. If I think our country's in danger, and it is in danger in these cities, I can do it.
So Governor J.B. Pritzker is calling this authoritarian creep. Is there a limit to how much the president of the United States can talk about one-man rule?
Well, is there a limit to what Pritzker would call President Trump as a way to fundraise to potentially run for 2028? I think what's also striking within regards to Washington, D.C., a poll conducted by WAPO a week or so ago showed that 17% of D.C. residents actually supported it, which sounds really low, but President Trump got 6% of the vote in D.C. So in addition to me, that's probably all the contacts on my phone who voted for the president.
We did hear, Simone, you're laughing. I'll let you respond to that, Simone.
But he put that many more people support it, even a liberal hotbed city like D.C.
What is first of all, our founding fathers, they thought about this, about the quartering of troops, about using the military to do domestic policing. And across the board, they did not agree. The Federalist Papers number 9 and number 29 talk about this. Literally, the Second and Third Amendments grew out of this debate about who should have control over militias or armies and troops, and civilian control at that, and keeping it away from one man. So what the president is doing is actually the opposite of what our Constitution sets out. But here's what's interesting about the polling numbers and the internal debates and people living in this city saying, well, yeah, maybe it's not that bad, what Trump is doing, because, I haven't seen a carjacking this week. The president is not... The people around the president are being strategic, in my opinion. And I say that to say there's just enough there to have well-meaning people who otherwise would not agree with what he is doing say, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not that bad. Same thing on immigration. That does not mean that he cares about crime, because what we are seeing, particularly here in the city, is that this pretext of crime is actually being used as a crackdown by ICE. Right. There are, prior to this federal surge in D.C., Uber delivery drivers were not being snatched up by Metropolitan Police Department. They were not canvassing neighborhoods, literally asking people to show their papers. They were not standing outside of restaurants intimidating the workers that could potentially work in there. So this is actually not about crime, it's about control, and I think that's why J.B. Pritzker is using that kind of language.
Speaking of control, Mark, so to bring up something you just said, do you think it is okay for the president to test the limits, really, of power with regards to the executive branch, as long as, in his words, he's being successful. Because that's what he was trying to argue yesterday. Oh, things are getting better, crime is going down. I can basically do whatever I want if that happens. He said, oh, I'm not a dictator, but then in the same breath, he kind of jokes about being a dictator. Is that okay to use that type of rhetoric, even if some of his supporters would say he's doing a good job?
Well, what we've seen in D.C. thus far, he's had a pretty good relationship with Mayor Bowser. She actually had a press conference today touting the crime statistics that have gone down in the previous 20-day block a year ago. And basically, she was saying about how she's having a good working relationship with him. So in terms of how things are really navigating throughout D.C., he seems to be doing a really good job with a large support of the population broadly. What this means for law enforcement interactions in other cities, in other states, that's yet to be seen.
Okay, so Daniela, we heard from Republican Congressman Mark Alford. He said at a town hall yesterday that he's not exactly okay with Trump sending National Guard troops to other states without the consent of governors. Could we see Republicans start to push back on this, or nah?
Well, to know, he's actually one of the few Republicans that is holding town halls. It's really interesting. He's doing 12, while a lot of his colleagues are not holding town halls. So just want to note that. He tried to distance himself from Trump in these town halls, and that was one of the ways he did it. When you hear Republicans arguing that what's happening in D.C., and of course Mark can speak to this much better than I can, he's a congressional expert as well. When you see what they're saying about what's working in D.C. with what Trump has done, they actually say we're okay with if for National Guard to come to red states like Louisiana, Arkansas, Ohio, and also try to clean up what's happening in those states as well. So you're hearing that they're largely praising the operation, but really it's unclear whether that's actually going to happen, where that funding is going to come from, what's going to happen after it escalates.
It's costing about $1 million a day, but I just want to reiterate, the National Guard is actually not doing domestic policing work. The people that you see with the Metropolitan police officers are special agents. We don't know where they work. Their faces are covered. These are not the troops. The troops are picking up trash.
They started as of yesterday.
DC needs that too.
Yes, on the federal grounds that if DOJ had not cut the money from the National Park Service that had the people who were staffed and being paid to pick up the trash, the troops would not have to be there picking up trash. Like, he's saying he's surging troops to clean up the city and tackle crime, and that's not what is happening. I used to do juvenile justice work for the bulk of my career, and the issue in D.C. is actually juvenile crime. How is the National Guard and targeting Uber delivery drivers addressing the issue of juvenile crime in the city? Is that putting more resources into the judges? Is that putting more resources into prosecution?
Carjackings are down to 87% versus a year ago because of this.
Okay. Well, Mark, I'll let you have the last word because we are out of time. You know, we could always talk for so much longer here. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Danielle.